AM 1480 WLEA.
In segment 1, Hornell Mayor Shawn Hogan. In segment 2, former UN diplomat William Pace.
It's time for Top Story on AM 1480 WLEA Hornell. Here's Ryan O'Neill.
Well, sorry to say that the biggest stories in the region this past week were that plane that went down on Friday afternoon. The plane that left Rochester and skipped over its destination in Naples, Florida, ended up crashing off the coast of Jamaica. Also, the shooting death of Rochester police officer Daryl Pearson. Other stories this week in the news. Nice that the State Teachers Union works to become a part or intervene in the lawsuit, followed by former CNN personality Colleen Campbell. And there's a new Martha Robertson TV ad out in the race for the seat currently held by Tom Reed. Well, the primary coming up next Tuesday, September 9th, Hornell Mayor, Steuben County Democratic Chairman Shawn Hogan is on to discuss the big races statewide and locally. Mayor Hogan, thanks for calling in.
My pleasure, Brian. Always a pleasure to be with you.
Mayor Hogan, first question is about the biggest race in the state, the Governor Andrew Cuomo's Zephyr Teach-Out race, and the Lieutenant Governor's race with former Congresswoman Kathy Hochul and Lieutenant Governor candidate Tim Wu. All four of these candidates are Democrats. These are the biggest two races in the state. It seems to me that both the liberal reporters and the conservative commentators are hoping that Tim Wu is able to become the Democrat Lieutenant Governor candidate. Can you tell me why this prejudice against Kathy Hochul?
Well, I don't think it's, Kathy Hochul is a fine person and was a fine congressperson, and she represented a Republican district in the Buffalo region, and she won that race in a special election. If you remember, the congressman that had to resign up in Buffalo that held that seat, and she won in a special election. And then she lost by very few votes to Collins,
Chris Collins.
Chris Collins, the congressman there in that effort. And when Governor Spitzer came out with the idea of giving driver's licenses to illegal aliens, she did not support that. At the time, she was Erie County clerk. She just joined in the chorus at the time, as most county clerks did. They didn't agree with Spitzer's ill-fated plan, and it didn't go anywhere. So I think, the Governor Spitzer's plan at the time was ill-conceived, and it wasn't really an appropriate plan, and she rightly opposed it. They're using some of those, the more liberal wing of the Democratic Party is using some of those stances, political stances, in a position that she held as the Erie County clerk against her. She had an A rating from the NRA. Because she was a strong gun rights proponent. Now she supports, the SAFE Act. She's evolved over time. I mean, she still has progressive views in regards to a number of issues, with same-sex marriage and things of that nature, on women's issues. So, I mean, she hasn't really changed, but they're using this as a wedge. They feel because she's from upstate New York and from Tim Wu is from New York City, that's their best chance, because her name recognition in New York City is not that good. And so they feel that Tim Wu has a good chance to be a spoiler and get in there and be a do-nothing lieutenant governor. It's a wasted vote.
I was wondering, Mayor Hogan,
won the primary against Governor Cuomo's running mate. Al DeButto lasted 6 months as lieutenant governor, and he quit because he couldn't stand doing anything. So if you're not on the same team as the governor, your position as lieutenant governor means nothing. I mean, you're head of the state senate, and that's about the end of it. So people will waste their vote if they vote for Tim Wu. They'll waste their vote if they vote for Teach Out, and it's it just doesn't make sense. And the governor, if people would just open their eyes and think of what the governor has done, you may not like his the way the SAFE Act was passed. That's one thing. That's one issue. And I fully expect the people in our region, aren't some people aren't happy with that. But as a policy statewide, it still leads in the polls. Most people support the SAFE Act in the state of New York. You can't deny the fact that he's improved the economy in New York State. You can't deny the fact that he's passed 4 on-time balanced state budgets. He took a $10 billion state that was $10 billion in debt and with a $10 billion deficit, and he turned it into a $2 billion surplus. In the next few weeks, people will be getting rebate checks of up to $350 for those families that qualify, that make under $500,000 and have kids that at least 17 years old or younger in the household. So he's returning some of the surplus to the taxpayers. He's forcing local governments to do what they should be doing anyways, to consolidate and reduce the size of government and make it more efficient. He's the 2% tax cap, the regional economic development councils, the promoting of tourism and the wine and the distilling industry in our region is unbelievable. I mean, his record of achievement in 4 years far exceeds any other governor in my lifetime. And he may not have the best bedside manner. He can be gruff, he can be arrogant, but he gets the job done. He's a New York City street politician, and sometimes you need to be tough and gruff in this business, particularly when you're leading a state as diverse as New York State.
Mayor Hogan, on Governor Cuomo, he recently took a trip to Israel. And he's a big supporter of Israel. Democrat Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver, he came out this week and went after Zephyr Teachout as a Democrat candidate because she will not take a stance one way or another on Israel. Your thoughts there? Well,
that's politics. I think that he came out and attacked her at this point in time because he wants to show the difference between her and where Cuomo is solidly behind the Jewish state of Israel, and Teachout is kind of non-committal. There are more Jewish voters in New York City than residents of the country of Israel. So that part of it's politics. I mean, that, and you're going to have that, but it just shows the difference of where they are in politics. Zephyr Teachout is an extreme left-wing candidate.
And it seems that the far left these days is anti-Israel. Is it just a guess that because she's in the far left thing of things that she could be anti-Israel and is keeping quiet on it, or we don't know?
We don't know. I mean, and until she says something, until she makes a statement, no one's going to know. It's all conjecture at this part. But she's just not a strong candidate. I mean, if people are mad, if the unions are mad at Cuomo, number one, he's done his job. And when you have Public Employees Federation, of which I was a former member, when you have them coming out and endorsing the minority candidate of her, someone of her stature, that's just a slap in the face to the governor, and it's meaningless. And they're mad because the governor made them take some concessions in his last contract. And that was things you have to do as when you're a leader in a state that's got a $10 billion deficit. I mean, you have to make savings someplace. There are just going to be disagreements on that as the governor versus the unions that just don't have the same set of interests.
In a big union state like this, and you see Rob Astorino chiming in, trying to weaken the union popularity for Cuomo. But a lot of conservatives will tell you that they think at the end of the day the unions will go with Cuomo, even though a lot of the big unions have come out in favor of Zephyr Teachout.
Well, that's public employee unions. A lot of them, SEIU, Service Employees International, have supported the governor. The construction trades unions have supported the governor. The only ones that aren't supporting the governor are public employees unions, PEF and CSCA. And so, they have an axe to grind. The rest of them, the governor has done it because he's improved the economy. Construction jobs are plentiful throughout the state. I've talked to some of my friends in the construction labor union movement, and the union halls are empty. Everyone's working, and that's great. And that's because of Governor Cuomo's policies, with infrastructure and the Western New York boom up in Buffalo and in Rochester, the construction. So and some of the public the infrastructure work on roads and bridges all over the state of New York. So it is a testament to the governor and his policies. I don't always agree with the governor on everything he's done. I'm a local government official. Has the 2% tax cap made my life more miserable? Yes. Are we living within it? Yes. He's making me be more creative. He's making me, really think about my next move and how we're going to do it, how we're going to provide services. So the 2% tax cap, I'm not too thrilled with it, but it makes me be a better mayor.
That's interesting you bring that up, Mayor Hogan. Some on the right have been saying all along that Cuomo is positioning himself as socially liberal, fiscally conservative, and that he wants to run for president. Do you think he wants to run for president or stay here in New York State?
Well, I think that probably he has one eye on the White House, but I think if Hillary Clinton runs, which I strongly believe that she will run, then it's out of the picture. So whether he's positioning himself for the White House or not, I don't know why anyone would want that job. Sometimes I wonder why I want the one I've got. But, I'm sure, I don't think he's made any bones about it, but he's a strong personality. He's always had a rough edge personality. He's a no-nonsense leader. And he's just that type of guy. But that's the type of leader you need in New York State. You've got to have a leader that's not going to be wishy-washy. It's going to tell you like it is, or going to tell you things you don't want to hear. And I can see Zephyr Teachout. All she wants to do is tax the rich, and that's all I heard her say. Tax the rich. Well, I think everyone should pay their fair share of taxes, don't get me wrong. But, there's more to the picture than that.
You think she's too Occupy Wall Street?
Yes. And she's an extreme, she's a nice person probably, but she's an extreme left wing. And like I say, there's no business, I don't think there's any business in good government for extreme right-wing ideology or extreme left-wing ideology. Most of the people in this country prefer common sense, centrist thinking.
Mayor Hogan, wanted to touch on Steuben County races. Now, for Hornell, looking over the Board of Elections list for Steuben County, it shows that the Randy Harkenrider seat is open on the council, but there's no primary in any of these seats, right?
Oh, no, there's no primary. I think you'll find they're both unopposed. Joe McKay, who's filling Randy Harkenrider's unexpired term, will run in November to fill that the remaining year. And then Melissa Ponticello, who is filling the unexpired term of Bob Murray, will run in November to complete that final year.
Any competition for those seats?
Not that I'm aware of.
The big races, according to the Steuben County Board of Elections, are in Bath And Corning, any knowledge of those races, Shawn?
Well, Bath, I believe there's probably some town justice seats up. In Corning, it's the city judge.
And Hartsville, I think there's one candidate going for the town justice position, Matty Perini, Democrat.
Right. And in the town of Hornellsville, I think there is an open, there is a town justice. I think that is open, and a town board seat. And the Democrats are having their caucus in the town of Hornellsville on September 10th, and I fully expect they'll probably have a candidate for each of those positions.
Okay. Hornell Mayor Shawn Hogan, always good having you on, and great to hear your positions this right before the Tuesday primary.
That's right. I'll just everyone get out there and vote. No matter what your opinions, get out there and vote. Exercise your right.
Thank you very much, Mayor Shawn Hogan.
All right, bye-bye.
Bill Pace from the UN coming up next here on AM 1480 WLEA. We're talking now with William Pace, Executive Director of the World Federalist Movement Institute for Global Policy. Mr. Pace, thank you for joining us.
Good to be with you.
You were one of those who created the International Criminal Court in 1995, the ICC. That's located in Holland. It takes cases referred to it by the UN Security Council. So first question for you is, there's been a lot of international news lately with the shooting down of Malaysian flight MH17, the recent attacks in the Middle East by ISIS and ISIL. Then you've got all the Israeli-Palestinian situations in Gaza City, the death of U.S. reporter James Foley. Wondering, will the International Criminal Court be taking on any of these cases?
Well, I think the answer is yes. I should just clarify the treaty to create a permanent International Criminal Court was agreed to in Rome in 1998, and then 60 nations ratified, and that's what's needed for treaties to enter into force. And so the treaty entered into force in July of 2002, and the first judges and prosecutor were selected in 2003 and 4, and so it's been up for about 10 years. It is a court that deals with the crimes that used to be called the laws of war, but in fact it's expanded now and it's called humanitarian law, and deals with even in times of war there's certain behavior such as you saw with the execution and the beheading of James Foley, or if you shoot down a civilian airliner like the Malaysian flight, or the unbelievable behavior of the ISIS and ISIL terrorists in mass killings of civilians, etc. Those are international humanitarian law crimes, and if the ICC were to have jurisdiction because the national land, the country of the land that has had these crimes ratified the treaty, or if the Security Council of the UN referred a matter as of the territory of a member state of the United Nations, then the ICC could have jurisdiction. So my answer in the long answer is that yes, these kinds of crimes are exactly the kinds of crimes that the international community has now decided to create a permanent court to try and hold those accountable for those crimes.
Neither the United States or Israel are signatories of the International Criminal Court. Wondering, can you tell us why that is?
Well, in fact, both the U.S. and Israel signed the treaty. On the very last day, it was open for signature in December 31st, 2000. However, the Bush administration in 2000, when it entered into office in 2001, in 2002, they so-called unsigned the treaty, and Sudan and Israel also unsigned the treaty. So Um, but it is true that neither Israel or the United States have ratified the treaty. And in the case of Israel, they have a problem that several other countries have. They have occupied territories, so that they would be immediately in violation of humanitarian law if they ratified the treaty. Turkey has, northern Cyprus has occupied territories. Morocco has the Southwest Africa territory. So there's a number of countries who, because of their current political situation with occupied territories or other international humanitarian law issues, are not able to sign. It's a great tragedy for Israel. This is the never again court, and I expect someday we will see Israel ratifying the treaty. In the case of the United States, theirs is a fairly consistent policy where they believe the court is needed and necessary, but it cannot apply to U.S. nationals or government officials because the U.S. has too much responsibility as a world leader, and of course our U.S. troops are positioned in over 100 countries around the world, etc. And so the U.S. government's position is they were pleased to use the court, but it cannot be a court that could ever be applied against the United States. This, of course, is unacceptable to over 100 of the other 122 countries that have ratified the treaty. They would say if the U.S. Ought to ratify the treaty, and if U.S. nationals commit these crimes, they should be held accountable as anyone else. And again, the treaty, the court does not have jurisdiction if a national legal system takes responsibility for investigations and prosecutions. So you're seeing in Washington those accused of terrible crimes in Iraq who were working for one of the intelligence Blackwater agency. So the U.S. national legal system does take on these crimes and investigate and prosecute these crimes. So if the U.S. would agree to take on the investigation and prosecution, then the ICC would not have jurisdiction. So again, over time, I believe the U.S. government will ratify, but I think we're talking many years from now with the current political situation in the U.S. Congress.
The Washington Post reports that John Ping, the head of the African Union, has complained that Africa is singled out by the court while the International Criminal Court has ignored crimes in other parts of the world.
Well, John Ping is no longer the chairman of the African Union Commission, but it isn't accurate. In fact, the continent that ratified the treaty the most was Africa. 34 African states have ratified the treaty. And yes, the African governments immediately started asking the court to come in and investigate and prosecute crimes in their countries. Uganda, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Central African Republic, Cote d'Ivoire, Mali, also Kenya had ratified the treaty, so when the crimes after the post-election violence in 2008 and 2009 occurred, the court ended up having investigations of those crimes. And then the Security Council has referred the crimes in Sudan, in the Darfur region, and then the Security Council referred to crimes being committed by the Gaddafi regime in Libya in 2011. But in addition, the court is examining, under preliminary examination, crimes that have been alleged to have occurred in Afghanistan, Colombia, in Georgia, in the Ukraine, in Guinea, in Honduras, in Republic of Korea, though the Republic of Korea case has been closed. So it's not accurate that the court is only dealing with Africa. It's just, again, something that the opponents of the ICC often raise.
You mentioned earlier in this interview not all countries take part in the International Criminal Court. Are there any countries that did not sign to become members but are in some sort of trouble for recent violations of the International Criminal Court?
Well, yes, Ukraine hasn't ratified, and Russia hasn't ratified, and the crimes occurring in that territory, in particular in Ukraine, in which Russians may have participated. Ukraine has asked the court to come in and take jurisdiction, and the Ukraine government may, sometime in this next 6 or 12 months, ratify the treaty in which the court would have jurisdiction. Well, I mentioned in the Middle East. I mean, Palestine, Israel, Palestinian Authority asked the court to come in, and the court determined, the prosecutor determined that he didn't have jurisdiction because the Palestinian Authority wasn't a government recognized at the UN, but now the Palestinian government is recognized at the UN, so Palestine could ratify. But then if the court were to come in, it would investigate the crimes that Hamas is committing, tens of thousands of missiles being launched, but it also would hold accountable Israelis who are accused of committing crimes against humanity. Similarly, in South America, in Asia, you have other situations. So there are times when a country that hasn't ratified the treaty is held accountable because, one, if the Security Council refers the matter, then it's because they're a member of the UN Charter and they are held to obligation under the Security Council powers, which are the strongest powers of peace enforcement in all of the international legal order. So there are instances where non-signatories or non-ratifying countries, nationals, would be held accountable.
Will Syrian President Assad be held accountable, and if so, how?
Well, the French government brought a resolution to refer the crimes being committed in Syria to the ICC in May, and the vote was 13-2 to refer the crimes. But China and Russia objected, and therefore it lost because they have a veto along with the United States, France, and the United Kingdom. And so will at some point the crimes that are occurring, the use of weapons of mass destruction, the mass murdering of civilians, biological warfare, etc., I believe at some point there will be accountability, whether it will be the ICC or some other justice mechanisms. Only we won't know. And of course, the situation is getting extremely more desperate and complex and impossible even as we speak.
Mr. Pace, your experience in the ins and outs of the politics of the International Court, the United States, has it hurt or helped your work in bringing the International Court about so far?
Well, the U.S. is a Jekyll and Hyde country, as we see constantly in even our national manifestations of politics, between the Congress and the President, or between the states and the federal government, etc. There is always this. And so the U.S. has been on both sides, where it has been very helpful. It was involved in all of the negotiations up to the very last minute in the drafting the treaty that created the International Criminal Court. The U.S., in a selective way, has been a very strong supporter of international justice and international law for most of the last 100 years, and currently the U.S. government is a very strong supporter of many of the ICC initiatives and investigations and prosecutions. The Bush administration declared war against the ICC and actually had Congress pass the Hague Invasion Act, where they would invade the Netherlands if a U.S. national were brought to the court without the U.S. permission. But 6 years later, Condoleezza Rice and President Bush basically asked the Congress to withdraw some of their anti-ICC laws because they were counterproductive to the U.S. And so the last 2 years of the Bush administration and throughout the Obama administration, the U.S. government has been a very constructive participant in international justice procedures and investigations, and they do some of the best work on international justice around the world. The problem arises when they might be subject to that. So the reason, people don't realize it, but the reason the U.S. is withdrawn from Iraq, the reason it's withdrawing from Afghanistan, is because those governments refuse to give immunity to U.S. soldiers or NATO soldiers from these crimes. They call them status of force agreements or security agreements. But what happens is that all the NATO soldiers and the U.S. soldiers cannot be tried for any crimes that they commit on the territory of those countries, and that's how it is proceeded. Both Iraq refused to renew those immunities, and Afghanistan it's ending in a few months, and we don't know whether they will. The new government in Afghanistan may, in fact, be willing to negotiate a new agreement with U.S. and NATO forces, but you're already seeing a major withdrawal of U.S. forces from Afghanistan.
And final question, the reduction of the American footprint in the region. Some consider that responsible for ISIS advances. Do you think that's the case?
No. I think those like former Vice President Cheney and others who argued that the U.S. withdrawal is the cause of these developments are being completely irrational. I think the original footprint, if you wish, into Iraq was a catastrophe, but this growing confrontation between Sunni and Shia Islam ethnic groups, between the religious forces, between the Islamists, etc., has been building for the last 40 or 50 years. I think the way in which the international community can restore peace, maintain peace, is a fundamental issue that has to be addressed, including with the leadership of the United States. But I don't think in the long run there is a military solution to these issues. I think that's a very clear message. There has to be a solution that provides for freedom and provides for economic opportunity and for justice and human rights and equality. And I think if we had approached the post 9/11 fight against terrorism in a smarter way than we did, we would be seeing much less of the rise of terrorist groupings that we have seen. But now we are where we're at, and I think the U.S. has got to work with Mideast governments and Mideast democratic parties and forces, and try and help restore peace with the international community assisting. And it can't be just the United States. It has to be all of the Mideast countries and North African countries, and it has to be the larger international community assisting as well.
We've been talking with William Pace, the Executive Director for the World Federalist Movement Institute for Global Policy. Mr. Pace, thanks for coming on this weekend.
You're very welcome. Enjoyed doing it.